Here's what's coming up on the world today. Czech Prime Minister Peter Fiala meets with Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in Manila. Fierce fighting continues to rage for a third day between the Sudanese army and a powerful rival paramilitary force called the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Plus, South Korea, US, Japan hold missile defense drills to counter North Korea's evolving missile threats. Republic Prime Minister Peter Fiala has met with his Filipino counterpart Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at the presidential palace in Manila for bilateral talks to improve ties between both nations. At the delivery of joint statements after that meeting, both heads of states emphasized the importance of improving bilateral ties, which include the business and technology sectors, and expressed shared interest in maintaining peace in the region.
Bilateral meeting in Manila. We had a very interesting exchange of views regarding regional and international issues, including the West Philippine Sea and cross-strait relations and the war in Ukraine, amongst others. We both emphasized our country's shared commitment to democracy, to human rights, and the rule of law.
We hope that our visit will be a new start for successful cooperation between our companies. Our companies offer solutions in many fields, many areas: agriculture, aviation, transportation, or space technologies. Defense and security cooperation is very important in our relations. I fully support the talks about delivering transport aircrafts and other projects in the aviation sector.
Former U.S. First Lady and 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton says the stakes for Northern Ireland were so high in working towards lasting peace. Mrs. Clinton was speaking at a conference to commemorate 25 years since the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, at a time when the largest pro-British party continues to boycott the developed power-sharing government.
The longevity of the Good Friday Agreement remains a true triumph of diplomacy and a testament to democracy's power to transcend divisions and deliver peace. But it is primarily a testament to a lot of tough, determined, everyday people who refused to go back to the days of division and violence. I well remember Bill's and my first trip here in 1995, the first time a sitting United States president visited Northern Ireland. And after the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in front of Belfast City Hall, in the midst of that enormous crowd where so many of the people gathered were holding the hands of their children or holding smaller children on their shoulders, we gathered right here in Whitla Hall. Catholic leadership stood on one side of the room, Protestants stood on the other. It was not easy for them to reach across that literal, physical divide. As I spoke from the podium, I looked up and I saw the leaders of Sinn Féin sitting in the front row of the balcony. And right behind them, I saw the leaders of the DUP. At the time, the parties and the individuals were not speaking to each other. But the fact that they were both in the same room at a women's conference for peace exemplified their openness to listening, to compromising, to agreeing on a better future for the place they all cherished.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attended a ceremony celebrating the completion of 10,000 new modern flats in the newly built Haosong district in Pyongyang. The milestone is coming just 2 months after Mr. Kim broke ground in February on another housing project that has been described as another luxurious treat of socialism, full of the people's happiness by state media. In 2021, North Korea announced plans to build 50,000 new apartments in the capital over the course of 5 years. And since then, North Korea said that it has moved forward with a series of construction projects, and some which are still ongoing amid foreign suspicion of food shortages. According to state news agency KCNA, Mr. Kim said the housing project is a long-cherished plan being pushed forward as a top priority by the workers, and the reaffirmed commitment of his idea to make Pyongyang a world-famous city. South Korea, the United States and Japan have all staged joint naval missile defense exercises in a push to improve security cooperation and respond better to North Korea's evolving missile threats. But the three countries agreed on talks in Washington last week to hold regular missile defense and anti-submarine exercises in their efforts to boost diplomatic and military cooperation. The drills in international waters between Korea and Japan brought together South Korea's 7,600-ton Aegis destroyer Yugok Yi I, the U.S.-guided missile destroyer USS Benfold, and a Japanese Atago-class destroyer also equipped with Aegis combat radar systems. The South Korea's Navy said the efforts focuses on mastering response procedures from detection and tracking to information sharing by creating a virtual target in a scenario featuring a North Korean ballistic missile provocation. Explosions and gunfire have been heard in the Sudanese capital Khartoum, and that's this fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, enters a third day. According to the Sudanese Doctors Union, at least 100 civilians have been killed, but the true number is likely to be higher. Here's more on this report.
Plumes of smoke rose over the capital of Sudan, Khartoum, as it was bombarded for a third day in deadly fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The deadly unrest erupted on Saturday in Sudan's capital and adjoining cities. The World Health Organization says that the ongoing fierce fighting has left at least 83 people dead and over 1,000 people wounded. Sudan's former Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok urged an immediate ceasefire and a return to dialogue between the country's army and the powerful Rapid Support Forces, RSF.
We demand an immediate ceasefire and to reach agreement that will lead to a permanent end to hostility. We need to at least reach a truce that will lead to establishing a humanitarian corridor that will allow civilians access to medicine, treatment, and food.
UN Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly called on both sides to return to talks.
There is a shared deep concern about the fighting, the violence that's going on in Sudan, the threat that poses to civilians, that it poses to the Sudanese nation, and potentially poses even to the region. Also, a strongly held view, again, across all of our partners on the need for an immediate ceasefire and a return to talks that were very promising in putting Sudan on the path to a full transition to civilian-led government.
But ultimately, the immediate future lies in the hands of the generals who are engaged in this fight, and we call upon them to put peace first, to bring an end to the fighting, to get back to negotiations.
The Arab League held an emergency meeting in Cairo where representatives of Arab states discussed the ongoing military conflict in Sudan. Similarly, the African Union's Peace and Security Council convened at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa in an emergency session to discuss political and security developments in Sudan. The council said it strongly rejected any external interference that could complicate the situation. Meanwhile, the Pan-African Organization says the chairman of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, will travel immediately to Sudan to engage the parties towards a ceasefire. Egypt and South Sudan offered to stand as mediators amidst the ongoing rift. in a phone call between Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and South Sudan counterpart Salva Kiir, the two most influential direct neighbors to Sudan, called on both sides in the power struggle to choose the voice of reason and peaceful dialogue. The international community has also expressed concern on social media over the escalating clashes. On Twitter, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister appealed for dialogue, restraint and wisdom. The UK embassy in Sudan encouraged British people in the country to stay home and heed travel advice, while the UN Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan denounced the fighting and demanded an immediate halt. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have also called for an end to the violence, asking all sides to seek diplomatic solutions. The United Nations World Food Programme said it had temporarily halted all operations in Sudan after 3 of its employees were killed in the conflict. The incident has seriously impacted the organization's ability to move humanitarian workers and aid in Sudan.
Meanwhile, the European Union has called for a cessation of hostilities and de-escalation in Sudan as the army and a former militia engaged in deadly fighting. AU Commission spokesperson Nabila Masarli said the number of European Union nationals in the country was small, likely in the hundreds, asking them to register with embassies.
The message of the EU is extremely clear, which is cessation of hostilities, de-escalation of the current situation, urging for the respect of the international humanitarian law and the protection of civilians. Daily humanitarian pause necessary for the welfare of the Sudanese and the foreign citizens, and we're putting the political process back on track. That's extremely important. All efforts are welcome to seek ways to support dialogue and mediation, return to civilian-led transition. And of course, we call on external actors to refrain from interfering. When it comes to the citizens, the EU member states currently estimate that there is a low number of EU citizens in the Sudan, probably in the hundreds. Ensuring their safety is a key priority, and we are making all efforts to contribute to this by supporting member states.
Let's talk to David Otto, as a security expert who joins us now virtually from Yaoundé in Cameroon. Thank you very much, David, for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, it's quite a lot to unpack here. Give us a background of Sudan's transition towards civilian rule. We know that the 2021 coup quickly put an end to that arrangement, sparking new rounds of widespread pro-democracy demonstrations across Sudan.
Well, as you know, Sudan hasn't yet, successfully done the transition. It was expected that this transition would occur. But, all of a sudden, we now have a situation whereby there is fighting between warring forces, the Sudanese army on one hand, and their counterparts, the rapid support forces. This is quite a disturbance, hugely to that transition, which was expected. Remember that, the protest had led to the overthrow of Omar Bashir's 30-year autocratic rule. And the expectation was that, there will be a smooth transition. But of course, this was done principally by these two factions, the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces. They were responsible mainly for ensuring that Omar al-Bashir was overthrown. And then, of course, we talk about the 2021, a coup of the interim, or what you call the transitional government, a democratic, as it were. And that led to a situation where the population has continuously called for this, smooth transition. But we've got to remember that, Sudan, since its independence in 1956, has principally been ruled by the military, and very few times when you've had democratic civilian governments here and there. So this is a purely military mix with some kind of theocracy, but also with a bit of a pinch of salt, I call it, of democracy. So there will be challenges. Bearing in mind that at this point in time, the men who have guns are making decisions over the ones who have the power of the ballot.
Now, David, we know with the deadly fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary group called the RSF, what is the implication of the clashes between these two warring parties?
I think the first implication is that you would see that this fighting is focused in the capital, Khartoum, which of course means it's an urban warfare, and the implication is that you will have direct confrontation, on civilians, on critical infrastructure. We know about the death toll. These numbers are not confirmed, because of course in the current situation, the entire Sudan, specifically areas like Khartoum, are on standstill. People are not daring out, because of course we saw that the Sudanese army deployed its fighter jets. The rapid support forces are highly mobilized in terms of, using, the gun trucks. They have that capability. So it's very difficult at this point in time to tell the exact impact, but the immediate impact is that we have a destruction of critical infrastructure. We have a destruction of, buildings. We have people being killed. Although both sides are claiming that they have the upper hand, but areas like the airports, are now shut down. The RSF is claiming that it has, control of the national radio station, meaning that it has the power to disseminate information. The Sudanese army is claiming that it still has control of the presidential palace, the military camps. So, it's very difficult to tell what the impact would be at the end of the day. But as long as the war continues, this is not good for the economy. It is not good for the safety and security of civilians. And this does not tell well, for international community.
True, David, I agree with that also. I mean, there have been multiple calls on the continent for an end to this fighting, this war, which is now in its third day. It has led to deaths so far. But do you see any peace initiative coming out of this? Do you think this will happen anytime soon?
The people that I've spoken to on ground, who have very reliable information on what is going on, they do not see that these calls have any impact. Of course, the UN and all the international communities have called in for a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities, or de-escalation. But I don't think this is working, because right now, what the Sudanese army is doing and what the RSF are trying to do, they want to consolidate those critical infrastructures. They want to make sure that they have control of the airports, to stop people from coming in or going out. They want to make sure that they have control of the presidential palace. They want to have control of communication that enables them to disseminate their information. They also want to have control of the military camps and ensure that they have the buy-in of the security agencies. So all the calls, from the likes of the UN, all the talks by Sudan or South Sudan, to mediate an Egypt, it is not doing any good at this point in time. But this is what the international community has to do. But in order for them to push this further, I think deploying individuals of high caliber into this area to speak to both sides or the authorities of both sides would be a great initiative, rather than just making these calls.
So what do you think the political future of Sudan is looking like, with all the international calls and everything happening around this development? What do you think the political future will be going forward?
I think it's not looking good, especially for those who are in support of democracy. A lot of Sudanese believe that this was a period when, after the rule of Omar Bashir, they would have some semblance of democracy, but that hasn't happened. The military has, again become the elephant in the room, in terms of, its political position that it is taking. So I think, principally, it's not a good news for the Sudanese population. This is not good news for the region as well, because, of course, countries like South Sudan may experience some level of influx of refugees, which is not good news. For Africa in general, we do not want to see, the military still being in control, as we've seen in some West African states. What we want to see is some level of giving power to the people, not a situation where people are taking away the power that is meant to be in the hands of the people. So this is not good news, and the implications are not quite bright, in terms of its outlook.
Yeah, you talked about internally displaced people there. I mean, human rights activists have also said that some residents in Khartoum region are stuck in their homes. They don't have food, they don't have water. Do you think that this clashes or the clashes can turn into a full-blown conflict if it's not properly managed?
If it is not, if there's no de-escalation, it will. Sudan has been suffering from, enormous humanitarian crisis, and this does not, make it any better. As a matter of fact, it makes it worse because people will want to stay in their houses. There will be, shortage of supply. People will not be able to get very basic necessities. Hospitals will be overwhelmed, by the current situation. So, it will just make the situation worse. And, the earlier this stops, the better. But cause alone, very strong words from the UN and the African Union will not stop this. What I think would stop this is if the African Union or the UN deploys a team, on the ground to sit down with both leaders of the factions and have, some discussions in terms of, what is the best way forward.
All right. Thank you very much. David Otter, security expert, has been talking to us from Yaoundé, Cameroon. Thanks a lot for your time and contribution on The World Today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And still ahead on The World Today, Sotheby's previews world's largest ruby in Hong Kong ahead of auction. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss and conflicts have all created significant food security challenges around the world in the past years. Currently, millions of people around the world need urgent support in over 45 countries. And that's according to Ryan Coughlin, the Director of Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Office of Emergencies and Resilience. He says that providing food aid is not enough to tackle the growing hunger crisis.
Probably one of the most visible changes, quite frankly, is the explosion, the mushrooming, the growth in the number of people in need of urgent assistance. The global humanitarian overview, that's a joint appeal coordinated by the United Nations together with partners. The Food and Agriculture Organization is part of it, launched at the end of last year an appeal to support some 230 million people. I mean, these numbers, quite frankly, are eye-watering. And it tells us that we need to do not just more, but we need to do it better. So you have a majority of the population relying on farming and a minority of the funding to support agricultural response activities. And this just simply doesn't make sense. We have year-on-year humanitarian responses. We also, as FAO, respond after what we call sudden onset events, after, for example, the tragedy that we've seen now of the earthquake in Turkey that's impacting both Turkey and Syria. This is also part of what we do, and it needs a time-sensitive response.
As Muslim faithful all over the world observe the last few days of the holy month of Ramadan, we took a look at how residents of the United Arab Emirates mark the religious fast, as well as hear what members of the business community say about the experience in the city of Dubai. Our correspondent Mayowa Degoke brings us this report.
Authorities in the UAE have announced regular working hours will resume on Monday, April 24, following the Eid al-Fitr holidays, which could begin from Thursday, April 20, depending on the sighting of the moon. Reduced working hours began at the start of the Ramadan fast as part of the rules observed by all. During the holy month, work is reduced by 2 hours, and while non-Muslims are not expected to observe the fast, eating, drinking, and chewing gum in public are not allowed. That sound signals the end of the fast each day, so iftar can begin. There's an air of celebration during iftar. Various groups and companies also host this special gathering to promote the spirit of unity, and everyone, regardless of their religion, is invited.
The most important thing I think we can learn as Nigerians is that our diversity is not a source of weakness. It's not a source of division. It's a strength. you have over 200 nationalities in UAE coexisting. It's Ramadan, it's for the Muslims, Christians have to go. That's really not how it is. And you can attest to that as well. Everybody is welcome and you feel that spirit all over.
When people breaking their fast, there is some traditional dishes which one supposed to be there actually. Everyone eating fruits, everyone eating dates, everyone eating, but there is some special dishes there, which one we are in Conrad, Dubai. We are serving here lamb uzi, which one is slow cooked lamb, which is very traditional, and the rice of the uzi we cook with the same juices come out from the lamb, so it's a very traditional dish, people, and this is cooking whole lamb actually. So it's very authentic for us also, and for people to see is like it's not a small piece of meat; it's a big whole lamb actually. And then we have a mandi chicken with mandi rice, and we have some biryani, which one biryani is very famous in Arabic countries and in Asian countries also. And then we have so many Arabic sweets, baklava, kunafa, and some dessert dates, which one is really like it's really good to see actually. Yeah.
Gathering for this feast is a community of businessmen and women from different councils. They have varied experiences, all pointing to the beauty of the season.
The first time I had something like a bomb went off. I got scared, honestly. I was really scared because I felt maybe somewhere had been bombed in Dubai and I don't know where to run to. So we were actually laughing around because I screamed and held and this is just iftar, it's just iftar. And I look at the beautiful restaurant, the way they were arranged, more like there was a wedding.
A lot of people will say during Ramadan nothing happens. For me, it's quite the opposite. Ramadan's taught me to be flexible, it's taught me to be versatile, and it's taught me a lot of patience. I think during Ramadan you learn to sort of do things at a pace that should be more natural to the human conscience. So yeah, I love Ramadan. Honestly, I make it a point to be here every year. No matter where in the world I have to be, I'm in my Dubai office for Ramadan.
Organized by the UAE Africa Networking Group, these kinds of gatherings serve as avenues for connecting and celebrating religious tolerance in the UAE. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Maya Wadegoki, Channels Television.
Ruby in the world to come to auction will be offered by Sotheby's in New York in June. The auction house said that at a preview in Hong Kong, it is estimated to fetch more than $30 million, which will make it the most expensive ruby ever sold at an auction. The current world record for a ruby sold at an auction was set in May 2015 by a 25.59 carat Burmese stone called Sunrise Ruby that fetched $30.3 million in Geneva. After being exhibited in Hong Kong, the gem will be displayed in Taipei, China, Singapore, Geneva, and in Dubai before being auctioned in New York on June the 8th.
It is called Estrela de Fura, which means Star of Fura in Portuguese, and it was originally found last year in July. And when it was first discovered, it was a 101 carat rough gemstone, which already excited so many people in the gem industry. And when it was faceted and afterwards, made into this beautiful cushion-shaped gemstone, it is one of the biggest and largest gem quality ruby that we have ever seen. The color and the saturation, the clarity together with, everything that comes together with the ruby, it's just a very, very fantastic and beautiful piece. It is from Mozambique, which is also one of the new and more popular originations that we see for rubies, apart from the more traditional and the classic Burmese pieces that we see. And we've really also been excited to see how the Mozambique pieces have been very well received in auction. And the previous record-setting ruby, for example, was the Sunrise Ruby that we sold back in Geneva at Sotheby's. And this piece was sold for about $30.3 million at the time in the total amount. And this is still the world record of rubies in terms of the lump sum. At the time, it was also the record-setting ruby for price per carat for rubies. We estimate the Estrela de Fura to be sold in excess of $30 million US, and hopefully we'll be able to see it, just setting a new record for Mozambique rubies and in terms of beautiful world-class gemstone rubies in general that we see at auction.
Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Stay safe.